Hello and welcome to Creative Outcomes. I am Ryan Watson, founder and partner at Upsourced, and I am your host today. Today we have a really cool guest. This is a continuation of our series where we bring on agency owners and we have candid conversations with them about their journey, how they got started, why they got started, what that process was like, what went well, what didn't go well, and what has the evolution of that firm been over time? What are some lessons learned? What would they do differently? All those fun things. Today on our podcast, we have founder and CEO of Wide Eye, Ben Ostrower. Ben, how's it going? Welcome.
Ryan, great to see you. Thank you for having me. Excited to chat.
I joke with you every time you come on. Every time I talk to you in a Zoom, I brought you on for the background alone. I'm
This is real. This is all real.
the skylights, the built-ins. It's perfect. It's one of these days I'm going to create something similar, but
This background is responsible for probably an extra 5% revenue every year.
easily. So Ben, I before we just get into it, do you want to do just a super quick introduction on you and Wide Eye and what you guys do?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Ryan, thanks for chatting. I love a lot of agency owners like talking about themselves and their businesses. So thanks for giving me forum to do that. Wide Eye is a 16-year-old creative agency that specializes in creative services for social impact organizations. We define them really at the end of the day. Our clients are all have a mission driven focus, whether they are um, policy organizations, they are campaigns, they are philanthropies, they are direct service organizations, or even trade associations. We have a pedigree from having grown out of politics. I'm in Washington, D.C., but really the scope of our work is expanded significantly to do brand and web and interactive design and product design for organizations that are on the front lines of change and have a social mission to what they do.
Awesome. And yeah, I mean, a number of I enjoy these because I get a chance to talk to you. I mean, you and I know each other. We've talked a bunch of times, but I get to ask you a bunch of questions that I don't actually know the answer to. So I have some personal curiosity in this. Starting with you mentioned that the agency, of course, is sort of born out of politics. Of course, I know that you're in the DC area, but I don't know as much about your life before Wide Eye. Like, what were you doing, and ultimately, why'd you start this thing? Like, how did this happen?
Well, I mean, I say this on calls with potential clients that in a lot of ways, why I started as an accident, which is I think honestly, if a lot of agency owners were really honest with themselves, is kind of how things started for them. We come out of a very sort of like fertile period of creative agencies, having started in like 2008, 2009, 2010, which a lot of folks that I know, a lot of my peers were leaving full-time jobs, potentially in the creative agency space or somewhere in the creative world, and went off and started their own thing because the internet was booming. Everyone was designing websites and doing creative work and finding new ways of selling it and undercutting some of the huge agencies that were out of reach in terms of expense. And, combining that with the economic collapse in 2008, I think it was just a lot of folks were like, I'm going to go off on my own. That's more or less what happened to me. My background before that had been I grew up in Boston and went to college in upstate New York, and then studied film in college. Wanted to be wanted to be the next like Steven Spielberg, E.A. Baker, you name it. Like, and I eventually like went into. I decided that I really wanted to work in documentary filmmaking, and I was really into documentary photography specifically. And I like the idea of telling real stories and helping to illuminate, history and sort of social issues through filmmaking. That's where my career started. And I did that for about 7 years, working with an amazing filmmaker in New York, you know, and making PBS documentaries. I learned how to run a small creative business through doing that, actually, and I appreciate that now. But I was also on the side, I was a hobby designer. It was before really a lot of these things had a name, but I was designing people's logos. I was designing websites. I knew how to code HTML. I had some internships in high school that where I learned how to do a bunch of those things, and I just kept doing it because I loved the creative process of creating something from scratch. Um, and so when I sort of left that first film job, I people weren't really hiring me to produce their films. They were hiring me to design the posters of their films, the website promoting it, the and I was sort of dabbling in a number of different digital design things that wasn't really enough to be a career yet. But over the course of a few years, supported also by a side gig photographing weddings in New York, I eventually grew a clientele that was enough that I could sort of go off on my own. And that's sort of what started Wide Eye, is that I was essentially a freelancer before, um, a lot of folks were doing that, coding websites, for Flash, designing people's logos, and generally just being like a jack of all trades and learning how to run a small business um, independently. And uh, effectively, it took off enough that I needed to do it full time and eventually start hiring people. So that's why I say it was by accident. Is wasn't even really calling myself a freelancer as much as just someone who you could hire that, and I eventually figured out how to call that. If I referred to Wide Eye as us and we on sales calls, I could command a higher, I could command higher rates, and that's kind of what happened. Then I eventually had to back that up with other people. So
Well, what's funny is, as I listen to your story, it's clear to me that you were more or less always an entrepreneur. Like, at no point did I hear in this story of you going and having like a traditional corporate job and, kind of a comfortable sort of W 2. Where did that come from? Like, is
no,
that
the
been, yeah.
the largest company I ever worked for was 25 people, and I made it about 9 months
Okay. So,
before I left and actually started Wide Eye. There's sort of more details in that story, but bottom line is, yeah, you're right. I think I always wanted to do creative work. I always wanted to work with a small group of people, and be really hands on and have a job where I could do a lot of different things. I think I've never been diagnosed, but I think I probably have ADHD and need to be able to need to have, I mean, yeah, and I need to be able to context switch and do a lot of things simultaneously to feel normal. And so, uh, some of this goes back to college when I was making films. I learned the most about sort of myself and how to operate in the world professionally, not through classes on film theory, but through making films with my friends. And I it sounds crazy, but it was like 1999, 2000. I produced a feature length film with a bunch of friends. We produced it digitally, and it should probably be released somewhere as like a kind of cult classic. It's not a good film at all, but like we figured out how to do something that other folks weren't really able to do yet. We did it for like $5,000. Filmed it on. This is like right before there was even digital video camcorders commercially available, and we had a home built editing setup, and we did special effects and all sorts of. It was ridiculous, but like it was the we want to do something, and I think me having friends especially that were like similarly entrepreneurial, that was like, I think it was a early ethos of mine of like, we should be able to do things that other people haven't done, and that's where the real rewards are. So I guess in that sense I've always had that sort of creative entrepreneurship in my blood.
well, you mentioned a couple things in your story that I think are like key principles, I guess, for business owners. One of which is, I mean, I often talk to folks who are contemplating, starting a business or enamored by the idea of entrepreneurship and all those sorts of things. And I have like a belief that is entrepreneurs like you should start a business if you are physically incapable of going and working for somebody else. Like honestly, you're probably like highest probability return is probably to have a job, and to be honest with you, the best entrepreneurs I know are the people who just can't. They're just not employable. And you strike me in your story as somebody who found out they are not. I'm the same way. I am not employable, so that's why I'm an entrepreneur. You are, it seems like, the same.
I was employable, but I think I probably drove my managers crazy, and I wasn't happy. Yeah, fundamentally, I think most entrepreneurs I know reach a point where they're like, okay, I could have a job, but I'm not going to be happy, and the people around me aren't going to be happy.
Aren't going to be happy. You're going to drive everybody insane, including yourself.
Like I have skills that I can use, but otherwise, it's not going to fly.
The other thing that you mentioned that is, a lot of folks who are kind of contemplating starting a business or doing whatever they are, there's a lot of analysis by paralysis. There's a lot of like what I describe as playing business, and a lot of reading 1,000 books and listening to a trillion podcasts and sort of looking for all sorts of like sources of information to learn how to do the thing. And your experience with creating a film is exactly how you learn how to do anything, which is you just try to do it. Like there's no playbook for any of these things. And the only way, and I think that's like applicable to starting a service firm as well. Like you can certainly get sort of a foundation level of knowledge, but there is really no replacement for going out in the market and trying to earn a dollar from somebody else by providing a service. And you're going to just learn so much about sales and marketing and positioning and delivering and everything by just being immersed in the problem.
Honestly, like yeah, I didn't go to business school. I didn't even go to school for design. I'm completely self-taught on both fronts. Similarly, my younger brother is a successful journalist, never studied journalism. Maybe it's a sort of the yeah, proud family tradition of not learning how to do our jobs. But the truth is, I think especially right now, um, fortune is always especially the last 10 years, I would say. Fortune has rewarded folks who are willing to just take the leap and get started on something and leap and not certainly worry about where you're landing, but not letting that fear prevent you from taking that first step. There are lots of folks, and I've come to appreciate over the years. Wide Eye right now is at a team of almost 30 is the largest company I've ever worked for in my life, and which is funny. But we have a very diverse team. You know, also in terms of work style. And so I deeply appreciate the way different people come at problems, which is also how, I've come to also appreciate how I'm different and how I probably drive people nuts as a result of it. But like, you have to be a little bit impulsive. You have to be a little bit fearless, and you have to know that even if there was a rule book, that if you read it cover to cover and memorized it, it wouldn't apply to reality because especially now the notion of what it is to run a business in the 21st century is changing every couple of years, and we're constantly having to rethink our how we do the work, how we recruit people to join the team, how we engage clients, and we're doing it right now more than almost any time in the last 10 years because of the speed of change with AI and also just the state of the country and how it's impacting our clients. We're having to make it up as we go, and that's the norm. Some people are not comfortable with that, and they shouldn't be entrepreneurs, or they shouldn't work on a startup. There are plenty of people who are like incredibly skilled and thorough people who would do a great job coming into a company after it's been established
That's
and
right.
running
Yeah, yeah,
again.
yeah. But 0 to 1's
The
not there.
zero to
That's
one
right.
is a different
It's a
mentality.
different animal. Well, so speaking of 0 to 1, like using that as a segue, I'm curious. So obviously you started kind of freelancing, and then realized the royal we was more successful than I. And so you decided it became a thing, it became a business. I'm curious, how was the first year? I mean, I'm just, was that experience meaningfully different, like starting a firm, or was it a continuation of kind of what you had been doing? Like, was it, how did that, yeah, how did that transition go?
So one thing I tell folks, and I think it's authentic, is that over the last 16 years, I've made every mistake you can make, and I continue to make mistakes. And in part, I think as a result of like making up a lot of this as I go, or at least learning on the job. It's not at this point. It's not making things up as we go. It's learning on the job. The first couple of years when it was just me, and then I had a freelance web developer that I worked with to help extend what I was doing, and um, I was very much making it up as I went along. And there was a break point though where we started to have enough clients and enough revenue that it started to feel irresponsible to not have full-time support accompanying me. And the whole royal we thing started to become something that I became insecure about, because when I was saying we, I was really just talking about me and a contractor. And so there was a point a few years in where I said, okay, I've got to buckle down, and hire a web developer full time. And within a year or two, then it was, I need an operations person full time. Then I need a project manager full time. In a lot of ways, those early years that were exciting and they were successful. We had low overhead, so we were continuing to be able to do really, really well and be very nimble. But with each new person we added to the team, we became a completely new company with a new culture and new requirements in terms of the infrastructure of what we needed to have in place to support that. So the first several years of actually having employees was characterized by changing vendors from a tax accountant that was perfect for me as a freelancer, and then bet much better as a small business, and that happening on every single front of how we operate, including how we design our website, how we handle IT, um, how we provide benefits. And so we were very much building the plane as we were flying it. And we were, I think, lucky enough to find folks on our team who understood that and were um, willing to go through that with me, and willing to understand that this was something that was coming together. I think it honestly took a significant number of years before it started to feel like we were a real company. And I think, from the outside, it probably looked like we were, and I think everyone understood that we were, but it didn't feel like we had our stuff together. Um, for at least a number of years where we had, payroll settled. You knew who to call when this thing happens. Um, the problem, the biggest challenge I ran into, is that because I started as a freelancer, I didn't know how to let go. This is something that was like torture for me, and I think torture for some of the folks that I was working with, and I'm just wildly better at now. In fact, think I'm I've pushed myself so far in terms of being able to let go of things. I'll probably need to pronate back the other way
That is a classic move,
any
by the
day
way,
now.
oscillating,
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean,
That's
but it's
yeah, go ahead.
I've tried to remove myself from a lot of the equation. That's a little bit of where we are right now. But at the time, because I was doing all the jobs, letting go of the each respective job as I hired a new person was both immediately a relief to me, but also I had ways of doing things, and I hadn't documented what those best practices were. In fact, I couldn't even fully articulate what they were. I was just doing the work and clients were liking it. So, how do I actually take what was in my head and I was doing instinctually, and make it something that was repeatable, you know, and extensible across um, more of my team. So I think that was one of the hardest things early on, was letting go of that, but also figuring out how to make decisions corporately and not just reactively, which is what I was really doing as a freelancer. Um,
Well, it's funny to hear you describe that too, because my brain is kind of fully planted in the things that we talk about and the frameworks that we have, and we have this framework. You may have heard of us talk about this, or maybe not, but either way, we have this framework. We talk about the life cycle of agencies, and there's like several distinct stages of life. And you described your experience struggling with like the key inflection point as you get to build mode. This was earlier for you, but as you get to build mode, you realize that like you've built what was a successful agency as measured by its size and scale, but you're probably working 70 hours a week and you wear 17 different hats and nothing is repeatable or sustainable. And that whole build mode the experience is all about slowly delegating, creating more repetition, and then also like getting the unit economics of the agency to the point where you can earn a profit. But yeah, that is the experience. That is the experience of a build mode founder. And that's the first like big punch in the face. Like, oh, okay, this is my life now. But you on the other side of that, you mentioned you're at 30 people. You're at what we would describe as grow mode, like the phase after build mode, where it's all about and raising the next level of deputies and achieving some level of scale and that kind of stuff. My question to you would be, what do you think, like as you reflect on this journey from whatever the late aughts to now, what do you think was the if you had to name one key to success, like one reason that you got here, would you say, I mean, you mentioned the way you described your journey was very iterative, like you were always evolving, everything was always changing. Would you say it's that, like your flexibility? Would you say it's like you had a piercing vision of what you existed, what you were here to do in the market? Would you say it's I don't know, what would you say?
um, I'm still questioning. Maybe it's a founder syndrome, but like you never quite feel like you're successful.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I totally, absolutely, I know. It's very uncomfortable even to have a conversation like this. This is like my third or fourth one of these, and everybody feels the same way. It's like, well, hold on, I reject the premise. I haven't achieved anything, but at least let me be the external validator to say you have built a very wonderful business that basically anybody who would listen to this would be envious of. And so, with that, what would be the key? What is the secret for you having gotten here?
So I mean, I think it's a if I really think about it, it's a few things. I don't want to downplay how much of this is luck, to be honest. And knowing when luck is staring you in the face, and I think I'm pretty good at identifying when there's an opportunity to pursue a thing, do a thing, to demonstrate our, the very early days, to demonstrate my value as a freelancer, and seize opportunities that maybe don't come along so often. So like I think that in the very early days, I was just really, I was literally trying to make ends meet and like pay my rent in Brooklyn, and I became sort of fearless in terms of seizing opportunities and just saying yes to things. So I think being able to identify those opportunities and say hell yes to them when they stare you in the face, especially in the very early days, in those build days, is absolutely critical. Even at the expense of sometimes your personal happiness. I think that like it took me those first few years. I think I was probably undateable, you know, and I was single in New York, and had a cute dog, and I just like I couldn't. I was just the work was completely all consuming, and um but I was saying yes to everything, and so I think that was really important. The other thing is that the other component of that is that I was completely relentless. I like I wanted to get better. I really loved the work I was doing. I loved the creative process. I liked making clients happy and doing things they didn't think were possible. Um, and I think I lived for the validation of that. And so that drove a lot of the extra energy that I needed in those very early days to kind of push forward. The other thing I would say, these are all in no particular order, but I accidentally had really strong positioning in the very early years. And that was really, really critical. And I see it now. But um, part of our origin story, we don't really do them as much anymore, but there was a few year period, 3, 4 year period, where we did almost exclusively websites and brands for political campaigns. Generally, folks running for Senate or Congress or governor. And every 2 years, there's a whole wave of folks. And it was that focus and having a good sense of what the price point was and what and the sensitivities around timeline that folks needed and being able to deliver on that and build a product that was better than everyone else's at the time that, like that built the foundation for growth is that we were doing one thing again and again and again, and there was a community of people that the more that I met them, the more work came my way. And it was that really kind of that staying in that very clear lane with a clear price point and a clear sense of what we were building every time and the problem we were solving every time that built a foundation that allowed for growth later. We now have like 5 different streams of sort of mission driven work that we do with different types of clients, but really we just had one at the time, and that was a key to early success too. So I would say like those 3 things.
Yeah, I mean, and I outside looking in, I experience all of those, but especially that crystal clear positioning. Like I always ascribe a really big chunk of your success to having built this very strong brand in that space over time. And I think that has served you incredibly well. So, I guess on the flip side of that, is there anything as you look back over the last however many years, 20 years, and think, man, if I could start again, I would do this one thing totally different. Or, I wish I could. Now, maybe all of it. We always, but is there anything you would like? Ah, man, if I could just go back and tell my former self this one thing, that would have saved me 5 years of headache or something, or maybe nothing.
Well, that's a good question. I sometimes wonder, I'm 45 now. I started the journey of doing this, yeah, about 20 years ago, even before I incorporated the company. And I don't know if I could do this again. Certainly not in this way. I think that like some people have like one shot at this in terms of where they are in their life, the energy that they have, the you have to be naive or at least or hope. You have to be incredibly optimistic and hopeful enough to start a business. And and if you're beaten down, if you've got a bunch of kids and they keep you tired all the time, and like you just don't have the gas in the tank, it's very hard to do. It just is. And like I don't want to under downplay that like having the privilege to be able to start a business where you have your needs met and you are able to be independent and have the time to spend on this, it's something that a lot of folks don't have. And so I think I really appreciate that time in my life, particularly my late 20s, where I had almost perfect freedom to do this. That being said, I think the big regret that I have, although it's not a regret because I think it could just as well have not worked out, but like I've always wanted a partner. I've always wanted a, yeah, I started this solo, and um, I'm the sole owner of Wide. I have obviously an incredible executive and leadership team that are the closest things I've ever had to partners, but they don't have skin in the game the same way that I do, which is that if if this company ceases to exist, I don't know what I'm doing, you know. Uh, and and so I think if I had been able to find the right partner early on and really invest in that relationship, I think we would have been able to go further faster. And I would have been able to, I think, have a little bit more balance in my life. Just the ability to like take a vacation and hand the keys to someone who has the same investment that you do is something that I think would be really freeing. Beyond that, I think I have made every mistake in the book. I've hired I've hired some unbelievable people over the years. I've also hired folks that have not been as good a fit, and have then gone on to be incredibly successful elsewhere. And I've taken on projects that end up, eating up 6 months of our emotional and mental, reserves. And I've made all the mistakes, and but you have to appreciate that without those, you don't really learn,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
You don't
Yeah.
really,
Feature,
you
not a
know,
bug. Yeah.
exactly. And I've always said, like, if I ever retire, I'd love to be a consultant for folks that are trying to do this, just like I did, because there's a degree of like wisdom and just real talk that sometimes you need to hear along the way that others, that you don't naturally have. Um, yeah, I don't know. It's just one of those things where I don't know if I could do it over again, and I'm not sure if I could have ever done it any differently. So
Yeah, same. Well, and your point about the partner is an interesting one because I think that I mean, often if I'm talking to somebody who's thinking about starting, it's hard to do it alone. And the fact that you were able to and have found this success um solo is a testament to you among other things. It's a difficult road. Okay, so let me ask you one final question, which is as you look towards the future of our industry, your business, I'm curious, like, how are you feeling? Like, are you optimistic? And maybe less about wide eye and just in general, like the space. I mean, it's just as you and I were talking before cameras were rolling, it's a kind of a very unique macroeconomic environment right now, and certainly political landscape. It's also kind of an interesting time to be in a service business at all with AI and all kinds of things. I'm just kind of curious, like, how do you think about the future of running a marketing services firm?
I mean, that's a good question. That's kind of the question, which is that, and I would be lying if I didn't say that like there are days where I'm very pessimistic and days where I'm incredibly optimistic, and but I think I genuinely, and this is sincere, this is not just me blowing smoke. I think I am optimistic about a certain type of agency model going forward. I think I think we're definitely in a moment right now, post COVID, you know, chaos caused by folks in Washington. You name it. There's a lot of upheaval, and AI is, of course, the big elephant in the room. There's a lot of upheaval, and I think a lot of folks won't fully survive this moment. And I think that's heartbreaking, but I think also inevitable with the you know changing of times and the evolution of industries. It's been like that always. My grandfather worked in printing his entire career, and late in his career had to move into a more sort of computer desktop publishing based process in the 80s. I remember him telling me when I was a kid, he's like, the number one thing that will always set you apart is innovation. I didn't know what the heck that meant at the time because I was probably like 11 or 12, but I now, after all these years, appreciate what he was trying to say, which is that you have to be constantly nimble and adaptable, especially when the world is changing as quickly as it is right now. And so I think the folks that are going to be thriving are the ones that are able to keep their eye not on the tools that we use to do the work that we do, not on the what are I would argue are sort of not ancient, but slightly dusty definitions for how our work is divided up, into what is it that you truly enable and the outcomes that you achieve for the clients that you like to work with. If you can stay focused on the outcomes, if you can stay focused on the relationship with clients that only an agency can deliver, I think you're going to navigate your way through. If you stay stuck on we're going to try to, rough out building WordPress sites till the end of time, you know, I think you're going to have trouble. I think you're eventually going to shrink back down to a freelance size business. There'll be some degree of demand for that work, but you're solving a technical problem and a tactical problem, not a strategic problem. We've started we've started to redefine ourselves as a creative agency that moves missions forward. Literally, our new tagline is creative that moves missions. It's the idea that regardless of whether we're building a website, designing a new identity, helping you, create a style guide for a new campaign or an ad buy or something else entirely, really what we're doing is we're using our creative prowess and putting our heads together as a tribe of people to solve problems that cannot be solved any other way but creatively. And so, yes, we create things. Yes, we send deliverables every day, whether it's a library of graphics or launching a website. But fundamentally, we're keeping our eye on how do we actually further our the individual mission of our clients. In other words, are we achieving influence? Are we building trust? Are we are we inspiring a membership of supporters who need to be re-engaged? Those are things that are platform agnostic. So I think that's a really critical thing that we're focused on, that I think the best agencies will continue to focus on and be able to integrate AI, for example, into their work in a way that's actually additive and constructive, not disruptive in a way that will hurt their identity at its core. Um, so I think that's part of it. It's also that, like, we do live in a world where, like, our employees can work anywhere. We can find talent anywhere. And I think for the folks that can build a brand that's strong enough to attract that kind of talent, you're gonna be able to do something that others cannot do, which is assemble a team of experts to solve a oftentimes very difficult to solve problem better than anyone else. That's effectively what an agency is, right? And as long as we keep our eye on that, I think we're going to be okay. But for the folks that are tied to this individual tool or just shipping deliverables on a daily basis, they're going to have to rethink how they do it.
Well, I mean, I'm going to steal this, but I'll attribute it to you occasionally. This idea of if you're solving tactical problems, which I think is a really nice way to summarize all kinds of things. If you're married to a particular tool, a specific kind of deliverable, we do a very specific X. You are very vulnerable to disruption, and if you are elevated to a solving strategic problems where the tactics might, you give space for the tactics to evolve as the tools around them evolve, then you certainly have a more sustainable model. And I think that's a really well put, good way to say it. Anyway, Ben, thank you. This has been so much fun, so great. I think I can speak for the hundreds of thousands of people who are watching this. That's true, but
Millions, right?
no, yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. Why are we cutting ourselves short here? The millions of people who are watching this, I think we'll have found your story both really, well, certainly engaging and interesting, really inspiring, also really useful. And so I thank you for taking some time out of very busy schedule to talk with us. This has been very cool. Thank you, sir.
Ryan, thank you. Appreciate it. And I'll talk to you soon.
Awesome. All right. And so for everybody else, thanks for tuning in. If you want to check any of these others out, you can find us at Upsourced is our YouTube channel. We've got a variety of shows just like this one. And beyond that, until then.